Alright, so in a previous video, we already went over the uncommons that are available in the Kaldheim theme boosters. Now these are cards that you can only get in theme boosters. They're available as part of the Kaldheim set, so you can use them in any constructed formats, but they won't be in draft boosters, which means that you won't be playing them in any kind of limited formats like draft or sealed deck. Kind of interesting, but we haven't gone over the rares yet. So this video is to follow up on those uncommons, and these are the rares that are available strictly for the theme boosters in Kaldheim. Now we're going to start with Canopy Tactician. Now Canopy Tactician is a 3/3 for 4 mana, 1 green and 3. It's an elf warrior, and other elves you control get +1/+1. Tap, add 3 green mana to your mana pool. Now, this card's obviously interesting. Elves seem to be pushed in Kaldheim, and this is the Lord. So it's hard to say just how good this deck will be until we see the direction that the rest of the elves in the set are going. But right off the bat, we can tell that elves are pushed. This Lord is not only going to pump them all up, but also add a considerable amount of mana. Now, it's not as broken as the Elf Lord that's available in the historic format on Arena. Some of the older Elf Lords are pretty ridiculous. This can only add a maximum of 3 green, which is a lot, but you're not going to be able to synergistically combine this with other elves in a way that generates you exponentially increased mana the ways some Elf Lords have in the past. So I don't think this will be broken. It really depends on how good elves are in general in the rest of the set. So hard to judge this card right now, but it is interesting to see just how hard they're pushing elves. It'll be interesting to see if that's viable in standard or not. Especially with this card in particular not being available in limited formats, specifically only being available for constructed formats, leads me to believe that maybe the elves are going to be pushed in a way that's going to make them viable in constructed, specifically in standard. So we'll see how that goes. Moving on, we've got 2 giants. Now the first is Sirland Flinger, and the other is Sirland Elementalist. Now Sirland Flinger is a 4/6 for 5 mana. It's 2 red and 3. It's a giant berserker. Whenever Sirland Flinger attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, Sirland Flinger deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to any target. If the sacrificed creature was a giant, Sirland Flinger deals twice that much damage instead. This seems kind of cool. I don't know how usable it will be. It really depends where giants go, but the thing to note about this card is that it triggers when you attack, not necessarily when you deal damage. So as soon as you attack with the Flinger, you can sack anything on your side to do that much damage, or even double damage if it's a giant, to any target you want. Depending on what the other cards are like, this could be pretty abusable. Being able to sacrifice a giant to deal double damage to anything is a lot. And having a fling ability stapled onto a creature so that it's not a completely dead card if you don't have a target for the fling is also really good. Like, one of the downsides to fling itself is the fact that if you draw your fling and you don't have any creatures to really utilize it with, it's kind of a waste. And this isn't. It's a 4/6 for 5 regardless. That makes it pretty interesting. The fact that it's a giant and a berserker, we'll see how both of those trides end up faring out in the end. Moving on to Sirland Elementalist, this is a giant wizard, and this is an 8/8 for 7 mana. It's 2 blue and 5. As an additional cost to cast a spell, reveal a giant card from your hand or pay 2 colorless. Whenever Sirland Elementalist attacks, you may cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand without paying its mana cost. Now, first off, I want to note that giants seem to be pushed here. There's obviously a giant tribal theme that's going to be running through Kaldheim, and that's super cool. If you can imagine a giant themed deck running Realm Cloak Giant and being able to utilize Cast Off, that seems pretty broken. The fact that Sirland Elementalist itself can cast off for free whenever it attacks and just wipe the entire board of anything that's not a giant seems like a really good play. It's also worth pointing out that you may cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand when it attacks. In a way, this lets you cast sorceries at instant speed. Not strictly at instant speed, but you're able to cast a sorcery at a time when you otherwise wouldn't be able to cast a sorcery. You can attack, trigger some other abilities that trigger off of attacks, and then play a sorcery. I don't know. I feel like there could be some really interesting plays to be made there. And 8/8's nothing to scoff at. The fact that it can be played for cheaper if you're running giants is really good. And the fact that Kaldheim seems to be running a decent amount of shapeshifter changelings that also count as giants is worth noting, because they can fill out your early curve and make sure that giants are actually viable. Giants' big problem tend to be that they're bigger creatures, so they cost a lot, and you have nothing in the early game. So the way Kaldheim's going, giants seem like they might be feasible, and changelings, we'll have to see how many come along, but that could be a thing. Anyway, moving on to the last two cards that are the rares from the theme boosters. They're both angels. First up, we have Cleaving Reaper, and then we have Valkyrie Harbinger. Now, first of all, Cleaving Reaper is super interesting. 5/3 for 5. It's 2 black and 3. It's an angel berserker. Flying, trample, pay 3 life, return Cleaving Reaper from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only if you had an angel or berserker enter the battlefield under your control this turn. Now, obviously a recursive threat like this is really powerful. We've seen that many times in the past, and right now even Skyclave Shade in Standard is a recursive threat that we see do a lot of work in certain decks. So having another black creature come into the mix with similar abilities is awesome, but the fact that it has 2 different types of evasion built in, the flying and the trample, really makes this, I think, the kind of card that would be really great for a control finisher, where you're using a lot of removal and this thing just keeps coming back. I mean, you need to carefully plan around the ability to bring it back. But what's worth noting here is if you have 2 Cleaving Reapers, one can keep returning the other one, and it kind of turns into a loop. So one of your first one dies, maybe you trade with one of their creatures, and then you play another one, pay the 3 life, return the first one that died to your hand. And then now the other one's in play, you can trade that with one of their creatures, that one dies, and then the one that you already got back that's in your hand is primed to be able to play, and then trigger the ability to again pay 3 life to bring the other one back to your hand, and they can keep looping. As long as you have a way to drain some life every now and then, you can just keep going on until they run out of cards. Now, I don't know how viable that is by itself, but depending on the direction that the Angels and Berserkers go in the rest of the Kaldheim set, I could see this as potentially a sort of extra synergy that you can really utilize if it goes along with what else we see further down the line. It'd be really interesting to see what direction they choose to take these tribes in. They're definitely pushing tribes pretty hard. The other angel is Valkyrie Harbinger, and Valkyrie Harbinger is a 4/5 for 6 mana. It's 2 white and 4. It's an angel cleric. Flying, lifelink, at the beginning of each end step, if you gain 4 or more life this turn, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. Now, this can go in so many decks. I mean, we already see how angels are starting to be pushed. Clerics were definitely a theme in Zendikar, and they're on the edge of being tier 1, I think. There's some really viable cleric strategies poking around just below the surface of tier 1, and I think if we get the right clerics, possibly this being one of them, maybe, you could see it really take off. But the fact that this also works with just the general life gain theme, we already have plenty of mono white life gain decks running around in Standard, and it'll be really interesting to see where this card finds its niche. But again, these cards aren't available for limited play, so I have to assume that there are constructed viable options, specifically Standard constructed viable options, for deck to archetypes for these cards to fit into. So, you know, a 4/5 flying lifelink angel for 6. It's not the greatest thing ever, but if life gain is really pushed, like I could see this going in an interesting direction, and I could see angels or clerics possibly going in an interesting direction. It's also worth noting the art's really freaking cool. Like the Cleaving Reaper art looks more metal than any art I've ever seen in Magic. Like she's wielding an axe that literally looks like almost like a guitar. It's almost like she's gonna smash someone over the head with a guitar. And the flavor text is really great. I won't pollute my blade with your blood, demon. You'll die by your own axe. It's just, the flavor in this set is really, really cool. These angels are cool. It's really hard to judge all of these theme booster cards without really seeing what else is left in the set. All of them seem to rely a lot on synergy. So we'll see where these cards end up going as more cards get unveiled for the set down the line. But anyway, give this video a like, maybe share it out, definitely hit the subscribe button, helps us most of all, and we'll see you next time for another spoiler video.